Hello everyone, my name's Mary Margaret for those of you who are new, and for those of you who are returning, hello. It has been a very long time since I have been on this channel. I filmed a video in January while I was on break from work because I am a school teacher, and then I found out it was crooked and I was having all sorts of problems editing it. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to use my phone because I can see what I'm doing and it's faster. Also, I'm not even going to pull books out to show you anymore. Just at this point in my life, I would rather just film the video, throw the footage in of the picture of the cover, and just have a video actually to upload rather than to just worry about it being perfect. So I just wanted to kind of give a bit of an update and just talk about what I have been reading, how I've been reading, like what's been going on, and just say hello because I miss you guys so much. And it's just been too long. And yeah, so as I said, I am a school teacher. I teach art for students grades 3 through 6 currently, and it has taken over my life. I really just have not had much time or mental energy to do much outside of just try to recuperate on the weekend and at nighttime and then get ready for work again. So within the past few months, I've really been trying to restructure my life a little bit so I would have more time to actually read and do things that I enjoy and all of that. In the meantime, I am also pursuing hopefully getting a different job that will be more fitting for my lifestyle and my personality. So all that being said, I have really done well, I think, with finding ways to get the kind of reading I want in because I really missed it last year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've been able to do that. So the first thing I have done is I have started listening to quite a few audiobooks. That has helped a whole bunch. So that has really been a nice thing for me. So when I'm getting ready in the morning for work, when I am driving to work, when I'm leaving work, when I'm picking my clothes out for work, that's when I am listening to audiobooks now. And because of that, I have already read 7 books this year. Only one of those books is two of them are physical books. But I have just really found that to be great because another thing I do that's very de-stressing for me is to work on puzzles. And so I can listen to the audiobook and work on puzzles for a few minutes every day when I get a chance. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that's been really helpful. The other thing I've been trying to do is to set aside at least just a 15-minute window of time to read a physical book when I can. Some days I just don't have the energy to do it, so I just don't. But even that just kind of gives me that feeling of escapism that I'm looking for with reading. And I haven't been forcing myself to finish books if I'm not liking them. I just put them back on my want to read shelf on Goodreads and I just don't worry about it. The other thing too has been that I have only been picking up books I'm really interested in instead of forcing myself to read things I feel like I should be reading. That helps me a whole bunch as well. So I'm trying really hard to make changes that will help me read more of what I actually like, because I felt like 2021 was a bit of a mediocre year of reading for me because I forced myself to read a lot of things I wasn't that interested in. I finished books that I should have just not finished, and I just didn't really listen to audiobooks, which for me personally, I feel like that's something that I really should do more of. So I do eventually want to do a bit of a wrap up of 2021. I really planned to do that and then it just didn't happen. So I do want to talk more though about what I read in January and what I've read in February so far. And soon I am hoping to be putting up a video of books that I really hope to read in the year 2022. And so hopefully, I say this every video, but hopefully I am actually figuring out a way to produce more videos because I miss it. I miss it a lot. I miss documenting what I'm reading. I miss talking to all of you. And I really love watching videos on BookTube while I'm getting ready. And so it's really sad that I haven't really been able to upload. So I wanted to show you what I have been using this year to document what I'm reading. This was kindly given to me by my future sister-in-law, but it is called a book reading journal, as you might expect. And it has a picture of, I believe it's supposed to be Jane Austen on the cover, but it says, if a book is well written, I always find it too short. And it says Jane Austen is the quote, and I know that quote, but I believe this is a portrait of her as well. So this is really pretty. It's on Etsy. If I can remember to do so, I will put the link below so you can find it if you would like. I have not completed all of the pages I need to in here, but it shows instructions of like how to use this journal. It has 52 slots, and my goal this year is to read 52 books, so I thought that would be perfect. It has this nice little bookshelf where you can like write in the books that you read or want to read. I haven't done that yet, but I want to. I'm just one of those people who wants it to look perfect, so I haven't done it yet. But I have written almost all of the first book here, and then I just filled in the title and author of the other books that I have read. I just haven't filled in the reviews yet. So I'm a pro at procrastinating. But I wanted to tell you about the first thing I read this year, and that was Men I Am Not Married To by Dorothy Parker. So I meant to show you, I got a calendar for Christmas as well from my future sister-in-law, same person who gave me this, of famous women authors. And the first one was Dorothy Parker. So I was inspired to pick something up by her because I've been wanting to read her work for a long time. And I really flew through this because it's like 20 pages long. It's satire. It is absolutely hilarious, and I absolutely loved it. I gave it like 5 stars, I think. It was just really great. So a little dated in some ways that were not great, but other than that, I thought it was pretty fantastic. So I would recommend that, and I'm planning to read a book of her poetry soon. And then I want to either purchase or check out from the library a collection of her short stories because I've heard those are excellent as well. So that was really good. The second thing I listened to this year, I did not read the whole thing in its physical version. I started it physically, and then I listened to the audiobook to finish it. And that is Make Something Good Today by Erin and Ben Napier. I've talked about it before on my channel, I think, but that book in particular is really interesting to me just because my family's from Mississippi, and so Hometown in my college years was a show I really enjoyed watching for that reason. And I think Ben and Erin Napier are pretty nice people. I like to watch their show, and home renovation is just something that I think is cool to watch about. And so I wanted to read their memoir back in the day, and then I never got to it. So this year I was like, I'm gonna finally finish it. And I really enjoyed the audiobook because it's read by the 2 people who it's supposed to be about, or it is about. It's a memoir. So that was a fun experience, and I flew through it, so I should have just gone that route a long time ago. So it was pretty good. I felt like it was a lot more introspective than I expected, and only part of it was about their HGTV years, which I was actually glad about because I didn't care for that part as much. I liked the earlier parts better when it was talking about how they got to where they are. So that was a fun one. If you're a fan of their show, I would recommend it. Otherwise, I don't really know that it would have that much for you unless you are from Laurel, Mississippi, which is where the show takes place. Otherwise, I did enjoy it, but I would only recommend if you're a fan of Mississippi or the show. So the next book I read is called The Ice Swan by Janelle Chieselski. I believe that's how you say her name. It's a historical fiction book. It is set during around the time of 1918, so World War I and the flu epidemic, which is, you know, I don't know why I thought I would enjoy that aspect of it, but I was really intrigued by the plot because it is about a Russian princess who is forced to flee because it's that time when, you know, makes sense. And so she goes to Paris, and then she meets this Scottish doctor who is working there, and they kind of like have these interactions, obviously because they meet, but it's kind of talking about how their lives become intertwined and their connection and relationship as it grows. And it sort of follows the flu epidemic, but I felt like it didn't really touch on it enough to be a problem if that's something that scares you to read, given the world situations of the past couple of years. So that was something I was a little wary of, but it really wasn't too bad. And I enjoyed the first part of it, but I will say as the book went on, I thought it was too long. And then my rating slowly declined about halfway through, and then at the end it rapidly dropped from what I started with, which was a 5, and then it went to a 4. And I think I was being pretty generous with a 3.5 star rating on that one because the ending was just melodramatic to the core. It was just too much, and I just did not understand why it was like that. So personally, not my favorite. I did enjoy it though. It was a good fun read, but I would not say it's like something I would highly recommend. It's more like just a fun time. So, and even then though, it's kind of depressing, so maybe not a fun time, but it's immersive. I did think it was immersive. The writing style was good. I felt like the author did a good job of researching, because the Russian culture aspects I thought were pretty well done, if surface level and perhaps a little bit caricature-like, in the sense that it was very much like the stereotypical things you think of when you think of Russia at the time. So I don't know. It was interesting, but I would say a bit stereotypical in that respect, especially when you're talking about that combined with Scotland, because the other character, like, there are parts that take place in Scotland, and some of that was a little bit over the top in my opinion. And I can say that because I lived in Scotland for a year, so I do think that some of it was a little bit like unnecessary. So I think the more I'm talking about it, the less I'm convincing you that you should read this book, which I'm not trying to be mean. It was well written. I just would not say it's like one of my new favorite books. That's all I'll say. Anyway, the next book I finished was the audiobook for Graceling. This one is by Kristen Kishore. I loved it so much. This was recommended by Julia from Shakespeare and Such, and I saw my friend Kara from Audiobook Garden also enjoyed this book, and I really would not, shy away from the audiobook if you're interested, because it's a full cast recording and it even has like a soundtrack and everything. So it's a little bit dramatic, but I actually really enjoy that aspect of it. And I felt like the plot was really quite original, especially considering that it came out a lot before a lot of different fantasy books that kind of follow a similar kind of plot. And there were quite a few twists and turns that I was not anticipating. This book kind of tells the story of this woman who has a grace, and if you're born with a grace, it means you have these special abilities that you can essentially do these wonderful superpower kind of things that not other people can do. So people with graces are both feared but respected at the same time, but also you can be kind of like manipulated and taken advantage of because of your grace. So that's what happens with her, because she has a killing grace, and basically her uncle, who is a king, takes advantage of her. I believe he's her uncle. It's been a couple weeks since I finished this. And so she basically decides that she needs to see what's going on with that. I was about to give you a spoiler. I'm not going to say anything else, but there are some other things that are going on that she's trying to understand why all this stuff is happening and what its ramifications are. And then she meets this guy named Poe. And I will say that's one thing I didn't care for in this book. One of the main characters' name is Poe, and I was just kind of like, I wasn't thinking of Edgar Allan Poe, although I don't care for him that much either, but it just makes me think of the Teletubby. Anyone else? I don't know. But anyway, I will say he is a fantastic character. I loved reading his story. I loved reading her story despite her anger, because I do not understand people who have a lot of anger. I'm not an angry person, but I enjoyed that aspect of the story, reading about her character development and how she and Poe kind of like go and try to figure things out. And I just feel like the character development overall was quite good. And even though I'm not usually an adventure person or an adventure story person, I thought this one was a really well done one, and it kept me engaged from start to finish, which is saying a lot, except one part in the middle. I was a little bit bored because I was like, what else could happen? I felt like a lot got resolved too quickly, in my opinion. But then you have those twists, you have those turns, and it keeps your entertainment. I don't know what I'm saying. It keeps you engaged and keeps you entertained. That's what I was trying to say. So anyway, that's Graceling. Would highly recommend. Almost gave it 5 stars. I gave it 4.5 stars. It's just the middle part I was not a huge fan of. There were a couple things thrown in that I didn't care for. And then Poe. The name Poe, I just don't understand. Also, there's a character named Bitterblue. I know there's a book about Bitterblue, and I'm excited, but I'm not excited about having to read the name Bitterblue all over again, because I was just like, really? Am I hearing this correctly? And then I looked it up, and yes, it is. In fact, bitter and blue together. Kristen Kishore, do you need some help with your names? Anyway, the next book I read is Cersei by Madeline Miller. Again, I listened to the audiobook. This has just been so nice for me as a teacher who has no time. Audiobooks, I love you. They're great. So Cersei by Madeline Miller, if you have not read it, is a story about Cersei in Greek mythology. It's a retelling of her background. And I had started the audiobook way back when it had first come out, and I just didn't get into it. I didn't give it enough time. But this time around, I actually got into it and I adored it. Gave it 5 stars. Love it. Now I'm like on this big search for more retellings of mythology because I loved it so much. I just felt like it touched on so many important subjects, and I loved the overall sort of theme of the book and the moral of the story. I felt like Cersei herself was a compelling character with fantastic character development, and I just loved everything about it. I really did. I had a lot of sadness when it was over because I couldn't believe it was already over. But I feel like it's one of those stories you can't really tell what happens in it because there are so many things, because Cersei is immortal, so she lives hundreds of years in the span of this book. So it tells all of her different love stories. It tells all of her life, basically, up to a certain point. Obviously, it has to cut off somewhere since she's immortal. But I don't want to give any spoilers, so I don't want to go too into detail, but what I did appreciate is that even though it does have violent parts, which makes sense, Greek mythology, and it does have some more of the kind of like raunchy stuff that's hinted at, it's never done in such a way that it just made me like, you know, uncomfortable, which some Greek mythology can. Now, some of it did, but Greek mythology can have some really awful stuff in it. And while this does, it was done in such a way that it didn't make me cringe the whole time, which I really appreciated just because, like I said, it can be very intense. And I felt like Madeline Miller did it in a way that was easier to handle. So I really appreciated that. Can't recommend it highly enough. I hope to read a Madeline Miller book soon, and I have another retelling, well, I actually have 2 that I just got from the library that I'm hoping to read soon. The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornitech, I think is her name, and then the other one is Ariadne, and that one is by Jennifer Saint, I believe. So The Witch's Heart is a Norse retelling, I believe, and then Ariadne, of course, is about the woman in Greek mythology whose brother is the Minotaur. Whoa, I forgot about that in Greek mythology until I read Cersei, and I was just like, oh, whoa. Anywho, so that was Cersei. Fantastic. Please read it. So good. So the next one I read is The Summer Wives. That one is by Beatrice Williams. I've had the work of Beatrice Williams recommended to me before several times, and I can see why, because a lot of it takes place during time periods that I find incredibly fascinating. Technically, it's historical fiction, but it doesn't really, this one in particular doesn't really hit on any historic times, really. Like, it sort of talks about the moon landing, but it's more just like a side focus. It's not really like dramatic or anything like that. So this one tells the story of a woman, or well, she starts out as a girl and then a woman. And I'm trying to remember her name, the character's name. She's nicknamed after a character in The Tempest, and now I can't think. Miranda. Her name is Miranda, and she is not nicknamed after her. She's actually named after Miranda. Sorry. So Miranda, it tells her story of growing up, and it goes from the past to her adult life. So past teenage years and then to her adult years and back and forth and back and forth. And it tells about her time on this island in New York that is kind of this like idyllic but also very dark time. It's kind of difficult to describe, but it takes place in the 50s and then the 60s, if I remember correctly. I know the second part is in the early 60s because of the moon landing, but the first part I think was in the late 40s, early 50s, if I remember correctly. Because it jumps time so many times, it gets a little confusing. So it tells her story, but it talks about her falling in love, and it talks about a lot of family dynamics as well, because her mother is getting married again because her father passed away in World War II. And so it talks about the secrets of the family, talks about the secrets of her family, and just a lot of like very dramatic things happen. And I feel like, again, it's one of those stories that's really difficult to describe because I don't know what would be considered a spoiler, but there's like a mystery, there's a murder. And even though it's not a murder mystery, it's more a family drama than anything. It is very driven by that mystery. So if you're interested in very dramatic family stories and you like to read about mysteries that aren't the main plot, and you like retro fiction that kind of feels like you're reading a tabloid, you would like Beatrice Williams, I think. So I did get another Beatrice Williams book from the library because I flew through it. I gave it only 3.5 stars because when I finished the book, I couldn't really think about what it was that I liked about it because there were a lot of problems I had with it. Anyway, it makes me think of the song from Chicago. They Had It Coming, because that's really like what it boils down to. And if you've read the book, you know what I mean. So there's that. The last book I have finished reading in February, a lot of these were from February, not January. I think only the first 3 were from January, is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Another recommendation from my friend Julia. I just keep winning with Julia recommendations, so thank you, Julia. But I've been meaning to read this book for years after hearing people recommending it. But it is a story about a fictional rock band from the 1970s. That's called Daisy Jones and the Six. And as someone who's a huge fan of music from the 60s and 70s, I enjoyed reading it, and it felt very wrong to me that this was fictional because I just want to listen to the music now that they made, but I can't because it doesn't exist. I felt so enmeshed in the story and so a part of it that it was really hard for the book to be over because I was just like, it's over. There's nothing else. And yeah, but it's told in interview format, and it's kind of reminiscent of like if you've seen documentaries about like Fleetwood Mac, that's kind of what it felt like, is like I was reading a documentary about Fleetwood Mac. And honestly, in some ways, I think it's like fan fiction of Fleetwood Mac. Not that similar, but similar enough, I think. Obviously, it does delve into the dependence on drugs and alcohol of musicians during this time period, particularly, which they were talking about how those things were like handed out like candy at the time, which I've definitely read about that before and heard about that. And so it doesn't in any way advocate for drugs. It actually says very much that you should not be taking drugs, but it's something to be aware of if that's something that bothers you. But I thought it was really well done. I thought it touched on all sorts of topics of like motherhood, of relationships in general, of working with people that you love, people you hate, how you can sort of keep yourself intact as a person, as a whole person, when you're sort of wrapped up in this whole world of fame and politics of fame and all of that. I think it's really just a fascinating character-driven story, which I'm just all about character-driven stories. Those are my favorite. And so I really loved it. I think minus a few parts of it, I would say it's one of my new favorite books. And I gave it 4.5 stars, which I gave the half stars down just because there were a couple things I didn't care for in it. But overall, that's a book that I would highly recommend to anyone who thinks the topic of it sounds interesting. But even if the topic is not something that interests you, I would say that if you like character-driven books and you're intrigued by the interview style, I would recommend it. And I'm very much looking forward to reading Taylor Jenkins Reid's other book, which is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I've heard really good things about that one. And yeah, but I'm kind of like saving it because I don't want it to be over yet. Anyway, I had a plan to talk about a lot of other things, but unfortunately, I need to stop because I see that I've been talking for 24 minutes. I'm going to try to edit some of that out, but I probably won't be very successful. So thanks for watching. I am so appreciative of all my subscribers, and I hope I will be back soon. If you have any book recommendations, let me know in the comments below. So sorry I'm talking so quickly. I'm trying to pack information in a shorter video, and it didn't work. But I missed you all. I have missed you all, and I hope to see you all soon.